am Richard Stanley. C'est moi, author, filmmaker, rogue anthropologist, paranormal journalist, and veteran of 1,000 psychic wars.
I want to invite you to a new world. To my world. A shadowland that exists one step away from what you take to be reality. A slide zone between fact and fiction. Fact and truth. A place where magic and miracles still hold currency. The other world lies sublime, out of space and out of time.
You are listening to Tales from the Otherworld, and I am your host, Richard Stanley. Tonight we're going to be talking about one of my favorite books, the dreaded Necronomicon, possibly one of the most notorious books in human history. And one of the weirdest things about this veritable anti-book is that it doesn't really exist. At least it exists in a slide zone between fact and fiction, between dream and reality. And no one seems to be able to prove the book's existence or non-existence. The basic story you'll get on Wiki is that H.P. Lovecraft dreamed the book back in the 1920s. Lovecraft allegedly saw the book and saw the title Necronomicon in a dream, and then ported it into his fiction. In fact, behaving a lot like a way a seer might have done in times past, taking the word of dreams and the word of gods and trying to interpret it. He interpreted the title Necronomicon as meaning literally the Book of Dead Names, and created a phony literary pedigree for it, allegedly written by the mad Yemeni poet Abdul Hazred in Damascus in 470 AD, then later translated into Greek and into Latin, and finally reproduced in various black letter editions that were passed around in Samizdat in secret for centuries. Of course, it's presumably totally fictional, yet I'm holding one in my hand, a widely reproduced paperback edition of the alleged Book of Dead Names, which is either a proof that Lovecraft didn't invent it or didn't dream it, or it's one of the most audacious and successful occult literary hoaxes in the 20th century and now the 21st, to shed a little dark light on the provenance of this title. We are fortunate to have with us tonight the creative force behind the so-called paperback Necronomicon, Peter Levenda.
Episode 1, Secrets of the Necronomicon, Part 1 with Peter Levenda.
Richard, how are you?
I'm pretty good, sir. Peter, I'm super pleased to see you, to be talking to you again. It's thanks to the miracle of the technosphere.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. Looking forward to our conversation. I don't know where we're going, but it's going to be great, whatever it is.
Well, it's fully immersive because I've been reading as much as I can. I'm currently getting through Dead Names, the book about the history of the creation of the most commonly available take on the Necronomicon,
right?
And in which you figure very heavily as a character. So I've been very immersed in your youthful exploits, the whole extraordinary picture that you paint of that period.
It was quite a trip at the time, I can tell you. I look back on it now and I don't believe half of what we went through then. It doesn't seem real anymore, but It definitely was. You know, it was just some strange people, a conjunction or a constellation of strange people and strange events and all bizarre stuff. And I just felt, you know, looking at the newspaper clippings, you know, it just verifies it. This actually happened. These people, you know, actually existed. They did these things, and you know, they stole these books, and they went to jail, and this other one committed suicide, and the other one died mysteriously, and on and on and on. So, and all of that's, you know, it's verifiable. It's there. It's not made up, and yet it seems just very strange, even at this remove. And I was there, and it feels strange. You know, trying to put myself back in that time.
Well, it's a very... Sorry, sir.
No, yeah, the 1970s in New York was a very strange period, I can tell you.
Yeah, I mean, this whole matter involves a kind of slide area between fact and fiction, which is very odd. There's a tendency throughout for fiction to become fact. Things which weren't true turn out to be true after all, i.e. Lovecraft's Necronomicon, the Grand Grimoire, this great book of elder lore, which is supposedly a fiction and a dream of Lovecraft, yet bleeds over into reality and manifests itself and turns out to be a real book after all. And by the same token, our own lives, our experience of this so-called reality, tend to become more and more like fiction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's what it seems like, right? As the book came into focus and became real, the rest of us became characters. I mean, that you wouldn't invent for a novel because they wouldn't make any sense. Nobody would believe it. You know, even if you called it a work of science fiction or something, it would still strain credulity, because who are these two kids, right? These are two 17, 18-year-olds creating a church to get out of Vietnam, you know, and in the process, they acquire this entourage of very strange, bent priests of various kinds and from various different denominations, who then wind up stealing books and become responsible for the largest rare book heist in the history of the country. I mean, it sounds fictional. It really does. You know, and the more that we were involved with something that was supposed to be fiction but became real, we found ourselves becoming less three-dimensional in a way, because, you know, you're looking at these priests, and that doesn't make any sense. But, you know, there's no congregation. There are priests without people. So you have priests and you have bishops and you even have churches, and there's nobody in there. So at what point does it become, at what point is it fiction? At what point is it nonfiction? Is the church fictional or nonfiction, right? And then by extension, the priests, are they fictional or are they nonfiction? Are they real priests or are they fake? And what is a fake priest anyway? Aren't they all fake? You know, so, I mean, it was a strange head to be in. And that was without drugs, okay? We were doing no drugs at the time. This was strictly, you know, in real life, in real time, without any chemical enhancements. And it was, you know, just bizarre. All I can say is that it totally strange.
Yeah, no, it's a story worthy of being a movie in its own right. I mean, effectively, you took on the identities of priests and all of the regalia in order to get out of the draft in Vietnam to qualify for an exemption. And they do say that we have to be careful what we pretend to be, because you are what you pretend to be. The moment you start to pretend to be something, to some extent, you are that thing. So I guess in the course of doing that, you became a priest. And
yeah, but that's the odd thing, because after all of this, in order to constantly prop up the illusion, for it to be less of an illusion, it had to become more real. And therefore, you went in my particular case with William Prosky and his father and myself. Prosky was actually consecrated a bishop by the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the real Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And as a result, then I became consecrated within the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, to the extent that a few years ago, once the Soviet Union fell and Ukraine became independent, I was approached by one of the bishops in Kiev to join his church, officially, since the church had, now was independent and could operate freely, and they were trying to take over all of the real estate that the Ukrainian Orthodox Church had in the United States and in other countries. That was another whole issue. But I had nothing to do with any of that anymore. But I'm getting these communications from an archbishop in Kiev saying, come under my umbrella, we'll welcome you with open arms. I'm thinking, you've got to be kidding me, man. Have you read Dead Names? Shall I send you a copy? But, but the guy at Prosky, my schoolmate, had, was running a branch of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in the United States. And he had absolutely no qualifications for this at all, right? We just bluffed our way, brassed our way into it, brassed it out, and then it became real.
Yeah, it's really pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
And and at the same token, this in setting that up, you met these ultimately came into contact with these two wandering priests who I forget both their names, Hubak and
Chapo and Hubak.
Yeah, the two wandering priests who had been basically pilfering priceless tomes and rare grimoires, mystical and occult tracts from libraries all across America.
All across America, Canada, and Mexico. Yeah.
And had amassed an extraordinary hoard of material, ruthlessly rifled from different rare books depositories, different restricted sections of university libraries. And among this haul was the manuscript of this so-called Necronomicon.
Right.
And you saw that original manuscript.
Yeah, I was there. In fact, we didn't know. This is the problem. The monks, in order to pay off Prosky, my school friend, who is now the head of the church, would bribe him with occult books because they knew he liked the occult books. But they were stealing everything. They were stealing whatever they could let their hands on that they could turn a profit. So books with maps in them. They would cut out the maps, which is blasphemy, and then sell the individual maps to collectors. Or they would just sell entire books and collections, and whatever they could find. But the occult stuff went to Prosky. So he got books. When I was just estranged from him for a short period of time, then he brought me back in because of what was going on with these two priests, with Chapo and Hubiak. And then he said, look at all this stuff, right? So there's books on palm reading, there's old books on astrology. These are like 16th century, 15th century. These are old texts. Impossibly valuable. I have no idea what they might have been worth. And in one case, there is a box. Well, in several cases, there were boxes of different half-bound books or books where the binding was falling off. They would be in these gray boxes with metal corners, like with very sturdy boxes. And in one case, this box, we're opening it up, and it's this manuscript, but it appears to be in Greek. Now, we had some Greek because in order to be real Orthodox priests, we had to be able to read Cyrillic. So we had to read the Russian alphabet first. We had to read the Church Slavonic alphabet, which was the origin of the Russian alphabet of Cyrillic. So we had to be able to do that. And we were clever enough, we were able to do this at 17, 18 years old. So I'm still able to read through a Church Slavonic hymnal or a book of prayers, it's an arcane alphabet. So we had that, and we segued into Greek because all of these alphabets initially came from Greek, two Greek priests who had invented Cyrillic. It's a long story, I'm digressing, but what that meant was we were able to look at a Greek manuscript and sound out what it was about. We wouldn't be able to read Greek fluently enough, but we were able to sound out the letters. We knew what it was being discussed. And when the opening of the manuscript starts with necro, right? So it's easy to read that. It's in kind of block letters, Necronomicon, right? I had never read Lovecraft. I was not interested in, occult, science fiction, horror stuff. I was interested in the real thing. So I read grimoires. That was my thing, right? I would read the Book of Ceremonial Magic when it come out. The A.E. Waite text had been republished. Books of that nature, Lesser Key of Solomon, Greater Key. I like that. And at best, Dennis Wheatley novels, right? So the Dennis Wheatley, The Satanist, The Devil Rides Out, and all of that. But Lovecraft didn't know what it was about. So I'm sitting there looking at this thing, Necronomicon, and I said, well, this is something to do with dead people, I guess. We're going through and we see, weird diagrams, and we're thinking, this is hot shit. Whatever this is pretty cool. Without having an idea what that might be. At this time, as this is going on, the Warlock shop in Brooklyn Heights had just opened. So we're talking 1975 when the Warlock shop opened. And I'm looking at all these manuscripts, or all these books and this manuscript, and I'm thinking, I don't know what this is all about. I would go and talk to Herman Slater, who ran the Warlock shop, created it. The whole shop was a few blocks from where I lived in Brooklyn Heights. I would go in there and we talk and everything, and this came up. And I said, there's this weird manuscript, we're thinking we need to do something with it, but I'm telling him it's likely stolen, because at that point I was investigating these two monks. I had gone to their operation, I saw what they were doing, and I told Prosky, the bishop, my friend, I said, these guys are stealing books. There's no doubt about it. They're erasing the stamps and the seals from these books. They're lifting them so they can be resold. They have an entire operation back there with a steam machine of some kind that's lifting out seals. I said, this is a sophisticated operation. And he said, oh shit, right. So now he's freaking out. The stuff is actually stolen. They're not just acquiring them somehow. So I'm telling Herman, I said, we got, the stolen stuff. We don't know what to do with it, but one of them is called Necronomicon, something like that. And his face just turns white, and he says, no, come on, you've got to be shitting me, right? And I said, I don't know why. What are you talking about? He says, Necronomicon? And I said, yeah, maybe that's what it is. He says, no, you don't understand. You have the most sought-after book in literary history. And I said, look, I read a lot of books. I've never come across this. He says, no, it's Lovecraft. Don't you understand? Lovecraft and, The Walking Dead and the Call of Cthulhu and all this. I said, I have no clue what you're talking about. He said, read up on it. This is the Necronomicon. You have to do something with that, if that's what it is. If it starts off with that word, that's most likely what it is. So I went back, and I'm talking to Prosky, and I said, we got to look at this and see what we can do. Maybe this is something really important. So we start to Xerox a few pages, but that's really hard to do. The manuscript is written on very old paper. The Greek is kind of faded in places and stuff. We're not really getting a good copy. I said, the thing we have to do is find somebody who can help us with this. And we had some other priest friends of various bizarre descriptions who would have had contacts among people, academia, who might be able to help. One thing led to another, and we had somebody at University of Pennsylvania look at some of the pages first. We didn't let the whole thing out of our site, but we would copy a couple of pages and move that around and say, see what you can make of this. And they came back and said, yes, it's Greek, it's of a certain period, but there's words in there we don't understand. It's probably just abracadabra, vocis magica, as they call them, just, made up magical words to sound spooky. But we'll look at it, we'll take a deeper look. And it took a little while, but they came back and said, no, man, this is, there's something else going on here, Some of these words look like they have another non-Semitic origin, right? It's not Hebrew, it's not Aramaic, it's not Greek for sure. It's something in that area, though. It's, could be Assyrian, right? Something like that. So they had to go to a specialist, and that's where we found out that some of the words and the phrases were sort of bastardized or bowdlerized Sumerian. Probably Akkadian, but with Sumerian and Akkadian, there's some sharing of terms and all of that. So that's what started the whole Sumerian angle of this whole thing, which has nothing to do with Lovecraft, right? Nothing to do with the Necronomicon as described in his stories. As I later found out, there was very little relationship there that I could identify. But the text is a Greek version of somebody who had written originally in Arabic, right? The idea was this was written by somebody writing in Arabic. And the Greek was either not his first language or had been translated by somebody who had an imperfect knowledge maybe of Arabic and Greek, but nonetheless, this is what we're working with. And that's where we started. That started the whole thing going. But in 1975, though, everything was starting to fall apart with Prosky and with the monks and all the rest of it. So from 72 to 75, I'm working on this project with a bunch of other people. And we're sort of farming it out in pieces because we're afraid to give the whole book to anybody. And so we make a Xerox. And we're working with Xerox pages as best as we can. We're making notes. We're trying to figure out what's said. Some of it was easy. Some of it was very difficult to understand because of all the false Greek that was in there, the Sumerian or whatever it was. So that was time consuming. But the hammer came down because the two monks were trying to sell some books to a buyer who turned out to be from the feds. He was in the FBI. And the FBI agent had been alerted to this by one of their friends, by one of the two monks' friends, who was, it's a sordid story. Somebody stole a girlfriend from one of the monks, and he had a grudge, so he found out about the book thing, and he set them up. The feds came, busted them. Once the feds got involved and the FBI arrested the two monks, Prosky got extremely paranoid and started burning everything he had that would tie him to the monks, which meant he was burning occult books that were worth a small fortune and that which were probably never going to be seen again. And he had this thing for stoves. So he had these porcelain stoves. He was a collector of antiques using his father's money. It's a long, sordid story there as well. So he had these stoves, and he would just start burning these manuscripts. And he said, you've got to bring this thing back to me. We have to get rid of it. We can't have this around. We are going to jail on this. And you're going to be involved in it, pointing to me, and we're all going to go to jail. He was extremely paranoid about going to jail, about being arrested. These two monks were already arrested. So he started destroying everything. And all the books that he had gotten from them, he's destroying. And later I found out from people who knew him that he was apoplectic over the fact that this could mean the end of everything for him. Well, it wasn't. I mean, nobody cared, as it turned out. Nobody went looking for Prosky. Nobody went any further than that. I don't think the monks themselves ratted him out at all. He was not really involved in the theft. He was just the receiver of stolen property. That's as far as it would have gone. But Prosky wasn't hearing any of it. So that manuscript went away. That, as far as I know, he destroyed it. I went looking for it after he died. I tried to find out if there was, in his personal possessions, if he had willed it, if there was a will, an estate of some kind. I was able to find out nothing from the state of New York. Nothing. I mean, nothing. It's like he never existed. We know he died. We know they say he committed suicide. I don't think he did. Okay. I think he was killed, quite frankly, because this was the time when the Soviet Union fell. The Ukrainians were taking over their churches. The last thing they needed was this guy running their church in New York. So I'm fairly certain they did away with him. He died of arsenic poisoning. It's the only knowledge I have of this. And I cannot find any sign of an estate. And I've written to the state of New York. I went visiting. I went back to the location. It's not there anymore. I started talking to people. Nobody knows what happened. So he had a lot of stuff. I mean, he had liturgical vestments and liturgical implements, chalices, ciboria, scepters. I mean, all kinds of stuff worth, again, a small fortune. You could outfit an entire cathedral with what he had personally owned. And none of that was to be found. I have no idea where any of that went. And I talked to other monks who were supposedly involved with him, other priests who were part of his church, his line of succession, as they say. And nobody has anything to say to me. They won't talk, or if they do talk, they have no knowledge of it. So that was a long, weird trip trying to get in control of all of that. Because at the time we had no idea this was going to turn into what it did. At the time we had no idea that Necronomicon was going to become Necronomicon, that it was become this thing that it became. We thought we just had a cool manuscript. We're going to translate it the best we can. We're going to find people to help us. And the people who helped us later decided they didn't want their names to be associated because of the book thefts. So we were left kind of high and dry. So we said, we're going to run with this as far as we can. So I had it. Herman had a copy. He had the copy, the original typescript, which I now have again. But he had the original typescript. And he had it underneath the counter in the Warlock shop for the longest time. Right? And some weirdo walked in who was a complete comic book fanatic called Larry Barnes, and brilliant artist in his own right, a brilliant guy, a UFO contactee, as it turned out as well, who was obsessed with aliens, obsessed with UFOs. When he heard that Herman had, the Warlock shop had the copy of something called the Necronomicon in it, he freaked out and on the spot offered him whatever money he wanted. He wanted to publish it. So that's where that happened, because otherwise it never would have happened. We don't know what we would have done with it after the originals, we think, are destroyed, and all we have is this typescript. But he decided he wanted to publish it, so we got contacted together, and I talked to him and I negotiated on this. I was afraid to give it up, and I told him some of the backstory. He didn't care, and we got a guy called James Wasserman involved in this, who was very deeply involved with the Aleister Crowley people and the Ordo Templi Orientis and Thelema in general, and he was deeply involved in that. He was starting his own book design company after working for Samuel Weisers for a long time. And he got involved, so the three of us were involved in designing the book and actually putting it to type and offering it for sale in 1977. So that became the year that all hell broke loose, because when we announced we were publishing the Necronomicon, you won't believe the kind of weird people that showed up and the strange mail we got and everything else.
This concludes Episode 1, Secrets of the Necronomicon, Part 1 with Peter Levenda. Tune into Part 2 in our next episode, when Peter digs deeper with Richard into the strange circumstances surrounding the publishing of the Necronomicon.
You have been tuned to Tales from the Otherworld, coming at you from the heart of the Devil's Pentagram. This is your host, Richard Stanley, wishing you all a very pleasant journey home.
Richard Stanley's Tales from the Otherworld is produced by Nerd Horror Media in Los Angeles, California.
Horror.